Welcome to the presentation of another judge on the panel of legal challenge for this year. Please welcome Jennifer from Fenwick West. Or is it Fenwick? Is it what happened to Mr. West? Could you briefly take us through the firm's history?
Of course. So it's lovely to meet everybody. I'm Jennifer Stanley, as you can see, and I'm a partner at Fenwick West. We did a rebranding last year, and we realized that everybody in the firm and our clients call us Fenwick, even though we are Fenwick West. Bill Fenwick and Hank West were our two founding partners. And so after much discussion, and I was on our rebranding committee, we rebranded as Fenwick. So now here you see this beautiful new logo, which took a remarkable amount of time to come up with, given that it's letters of the alphabet. Fenwick is a technology-focused firm based here in Silicon Valley. We were founded in 1972. And we're based in Mountain View, San Francisco, where my home office is. And then we have offices around the US, New York, Seattle, Santa Monica, and then we have a small office in Shanghai as well. And I've been with the firm for 21 years, believe it or not, despite my youthful appearance and demeanor. I know that's shocking for some. And I'm originally from Ireland. I started my legal career practicing law back in Dublin a long, long time ago, and then decided to head to Silicon Valley to do technology law and started at Fenwick, and I've been there ever since.
So how did you convert from being a European lawyer to being an American lawyer? You had to pass the bar exam? You had to go to law school, or?
I did not have to go to law school. So as some of you guys may know, and one of the reasons I just love, A, the games industry, and B, meeting everybody when we come to Vilnius, is the international nature of the industry. So Ireland, as some of you guys know, is a common law jurisdiction. So when I was admitted to practice law in Ireland, back in the mid-90s, I was admitted to practice in a common law jurisdiction similar to Canada, Australia, here England, and here in the United States as well. So when I came to California, the requirement to take the California bar exam is you need to be admitted to practice law in another common law jurisdiction. If that is the case, you don't have to do anything except sit the bar exam. So I remember very well, I came here in 1999 in the spring, and I took the bar in the summer of 1999. I studied for 7 weeks. It was a rough 7 weeks because the bar exam is hard. And boom, I took the bar exam, I passed it, and I was good to go, ready to practice law, really having never set foot in a law firm here in the US. But if you're admitted to practice in another common law jurisdiction, you can take the California bar without doing anything else.
That's pretty amazing. I never realized that someone can go to law school in, I don't know, Sydney or London and then just, whoa. So that's a big advantage for anyone from the common law jurisdiction, I guess. Like if you graduate from a German law school, they're going to train you, I don't know for how many years. Tobias will know, probably like 12 years and then 6 years more. And then you go to the US and you cannot do anything, but then you go to the UK or to Australia. Okay, that's pretty cool. And when you say like Mountain View, is it really the heart of the Silicon Valley? I mean, we all know San Francisco because as a games industry, we go to GDC. Or we used to go to GDC a lot. Some of us...
We'll be back.
Yeah. I mean, it had some issues also with how expensive the city was in the last few years.
Sure.
But some of them, us also went across the bridge to visit Lucasfilm, to visit, I think it was Telltales before they went bust and so on. But I don't really recall any games companies being based somewhere across the bay. I think some of the older ones were there, but not really down there, down south. So is there any games presence? Is it the heart of the technology, or?
So it's a really great question. And I think for those of us who live here in the Bay Area, there is quite a distinction between Palo Alto, Mountain View, etc., and San Francisco, partly because they're 35 to 40 miles apart. So one needs to travel if one goes there. But for people coming to the Bay Area, really where our companies are and where our clients are, it sort of doesn't really matter. We consider it to be really the whole Bay Area. And so I think to answer your question, Sergey, there are a lot of games companies down in the valley, which is what I call it because I'm sitting here in San Francisco right now. Electronic Arts is there, for example. Tencent is there. Apple is there.
Ubisoft
Google
has
is
a pretty huge office there too. Yeah.
Right, and then of course we have our client base here in San Francisco in the city as well, and in the East Bay and across the bridge, as you say. And the other point I think which is important is, certainly from where I sit at Fenwick, our practice is so global and international that the physical geographic location of where our clients are, matters less and less in many ways. I work with Riot Games a lot, for example. The team that I work with at Riot are down in the Los Angeles area, for example. I work with the Tencent team a lot, and most of the Tencent team that I work with are in China. So, I work with the Supercell team a lot, and, the people that I work with are not here in the US at all. So it becomes very accessible, and I've seen changes over my years at Fenwick in terms of, how geography matters less and less, except, of course, that it is lovely to meet people in person, which is why we love when people come to San Francisco for GDC, and hopefully we'll see people back here in 2022.
I have great memories of San Francisco because that happens when back in Europe it's still a bit cold and not really that much sun, and you get to San Francisco, you sit in the sun. A lot of us get sunburned on the first weekend on GDC because you just want to sit there in the sun and absorb the whole thing. There's a fantastic fish place across the bridge called Fish, which is totally great. You just sit there in the harbor. Yeah, so all of that is connected, but I think, I may be wrong, but I think the GDC goes the same way as Melee events. There was an amazing game show called Melee, which happened in Cannes in France, in the Place du Cinéma. So you were sitting on the seaside in Cannes, off-season, smelling flowers of the springtime in February, eating amazing food. And I think it was like Take Two or Bethesda, they would just take a yacht and say, well, your meeting is, be at the pier here, they'll take you. And there's a little boat coming in, taking you out, and then you're having a meeting on the boat. So, but sadly, the world turned over and that show no longer was relevant. And so now what I'm seeing with GDC is that the cost and the sort of hassle even for the star developers who are selling millions of units but are not global, it's becoming a bit of an we'll see. We'll see if that sticks. So a question for you, Brian, for example, whom you know from Kim and Chang and Seoul in Korea, most of his clients are international companies doing business in Korea. He's the interlocutor. He's the guy who helps them understand the Korean market and deal with it. I don't know about Alex Rudoni at Talon and Overy, but I would imagine most of his clients would be non-French. Even though I know that he works a lot with the French company, but I think that, at least to our community, a big advantage of knowing Alex is that he's the guy who gets me totally, but he's the French guy, so he can be my local guide. So for you and your clients, is this that you're the American guide for Tencent, which is from China, Supercell, which is from Finland, or it's more of a balanced basket?
It's a great question, and I would say more of a balance, primarily because we, of course, practice US law here at Fenwick, despite the fact that my clients get a little bit of a different flavor of experience because I could speak to the European side too, because I am admitted to practice there. And a long time ago, I studied international law in Brussels, in Belgium, actually. But that's kind of personal to me, my own story. But at Fenwick, we practice US law, so our clients come to us for US legal issues. But the world and the games industry in particular, for some of the transactional issues that I see, which I'll describe in a moment, are often ubiquitous, especially from a commercial perspective. So my practice is transactional. I think about myself and my team who are behind me on my Zoom background. As you can see, I have an awesome team here at Fenwick. We think about ourselves as sort of primary care, business, intellectual property, and commercial counselors for companies in the games industry. And we offer a full suite of services to our clients, from litigation to corporate work to tax to all kinds of IP and commercial transactional work. But my focus is commercial transactional work and business counseling. So I do a lot of intellectual property counseling on games themselves, the physical aspects of the games themselves. In other words, a very common kind of question I would have would be, hey, Jennifer, can you look at this character that I'm going to put in my game and tell me if I'm going to get into trouble? Do I need to change anything? And sometimes the answer is no, that looks okay. And sometimes the answer is you should change the weapon and the hair color and the gender and something else of the character, and then it looks okay. And I had to tell a client once to do that, and the client was like, so basically I need to pretty much change everything.
Change the whole thing. Yeah.
And then the other place where I spend a lot of time is negotiating commercial deals. So with that in mind, if I'm negotiating a deal, let's say it's a big development and publication deal for a client, that might be representing my client adverse to a large IP owner, for example. And if I'm doing that kind of a deal, then while yes, we are looking at it for US legal issues, as we all know in the games industry, sometimes there are commercial norms that actually transpose geography, because we have an industry to think about, we have players to think about, in addition to some legal compliance issues that appear in other countries. So I think, yes, of course, we will take care of any US legal issue that a company needs. And from the network of my friends and colleagues in the games industry, I often do that. And it's just lovely. I often have people from other countries reach out to me and ask us to help out on a US legal issue. But we also get to help a little bit more on some of the more global norms. And so with that in mind, the geographic location of our clients tends to matter less. And that's certainly been an observation of mine over my years of Fenwick.
Good. How big is your firm in the sense of, in the sense of headcount?
Sure. So we have about 500 attorneys. So we are not a huge firm. We have 110 partners, give or take. And then we have a significant number of other professionals at the firm. So we are your classic Silicon Valley business. We try to be as innovative as our clients for lawyers, which of course means we're not as innovative as our clients, but we do try. So in addition to having the typical associate partner counsel model that many law firms have around the world, we also have a series of professionals who work for us who are not lawyers at all. So our clients get access to our IT department, for example, if they want to think about how to work internally with their anything from a document management system or security, things like that.
What about auditors?
Pardon?
What about auditors? Can you guys perform like CPA? Can you audit someone's books?
We don't do that kind of audit, but we actually do have a series of compliance professionals on the data privacy side where we do compliance and implementation work. So not kind of CPA style work, but certainly for privacy compliance we do. And if you take a company that is dealing with a consent decree here in the United States, like a Facebook, for example, we send a team of people into our clients to help with data security and privacy compliance. And that team it's more like a consultancy model rather than a lawyer providing legal services model.
Okay.
And then we also have a series of patent agents who help with patent prosecution and patent analysis, again, who are not lawyers. So with that in mind, we have north of 600-700 professionals working for us at the firm in our offices.
Okay. I think for game studios, we like to measure them in wargamings. So for example, my studio is 0.2% of wargaming. And for law firms, I think I'll use Kim and Chang and say, well, you're about 20% of Kim and Chang, or maybe like 25%. Yeah, I mean, law firms come in all sizes, and when you work with just the lawyer, Generally, it doesn't matter. Like, you know that person and you work with that person, and it doesn't. It's a theoretical interest if there's more people down the hall here or there, but it's always helpful to get this within the context and understand. Okay, let's say I'm a lawyer joining Fenwick. Is it going to be a sort of a family thing? Is it going to be a huge transactional thing, multinational or something? What is your connection and involvement in the games industry? Is this a large part, completely what you do, or is it growing? Is it sort of keeping its share?
It is a significant, very, very large part of my practice. So, you know, my story is when I was in law school back in Ireland, you know, which feels like about 100 years ago right now, I really fell in love with intellectual property law and anything that was accessible to consumers in the world. That really got me excited. Tort law also I found fascinating. So I began to think about where I wanted to spend my career. And when I found myself in Silicon Valley in 1999, and I was looking at firms, I really wanted to combine my interest in consumer-oriented technology and the law. And Fenwick offered me that way back then. And so the way I really think about my practice at Fenwick is, you know, we're a law firm that provides legal services and other services to technology companies. And some of my colleagues do a lot of work in the life sciences space. So they make people live longer, make them healthy, keep everybody in good shape. And then I bring them fun and joy, one client at a time, with video games, with content, with food, with the sharing economy. So my practice at Fenwick really is anything that consumers are sort of enjoying at that moment in time. And one of the reasons that I stayed at the firm all these years is because working with the innovative clients that we have, we really get to see the future. You know, when I started working with Oculus, it was a long time ago, and it was before the idea of having a VR experience was as common as it is now. And so your client brings you something and you're just like, oh my gosh, the world doesn't even know that this is possible. When I started working with Niantic, same thing. You know, to think that you could have this augmented reality experience in the world with a character that you know. And then I'm absolutely obsessed with Harry Potter. And when Niantic told me we got a chance to bring augmented reality and Harry Potter, two of my favorite things in the world, together, you know, it was like a dream come true. And so with that in mind, Fenwick itself, we have an extremely a client list that we're very proud of. I wanted to say extremely impressive, but that sounds a little arrogant. So I'm trying to change how I describe this. But it's a privilege to work with the clients that we have, actually. It is an absolute privilege. And so as a result of that, I get to work, and my team gets to work with, you know, really the most creative and innovative games companies in the world. And so over my years at Fenwick, I have seen, as we all have in the industry, the evolution of new things, trends. I know I will continue to see those as years go by, and that's sort of what keeps me interested and excited.
Well, I mean, it sounds like, so for example, when you talk about Oculus, I remember late 90s going to San Francisco, to the Bay Area, going to Auckland to meet some of the early publishers, and they were the emerging thing at that time. At that time, they were like, starting to make money, but there was a company called Ocean, like there's lots of different companies, and you could see that they started to make money, but they were not really established. They were not really a book, you know, publishing houses or film companies, so people really didn't take them seriously. But you could look at the figures and say, holy moly, like, wow. So yeah, 10 years later, 20 years later, it's an established industry. You know, we understand why, and so on. So I see where you are in terms of the technology moving forward, and you moving with the technology to understand how law deals with it and applies it. Okay, great. As a judge, going back to the legal challenge, how would you present yourself to the teams. There's 4 teams that are going to be watching probably this piece very attentively. Maybe they'll rewind and rewatch. What should they expect from you as a judge, and what would you tell them in terms of how should they conduct themselves in this digital hearing?
So, first of all, I would congratulate them on being in front of me. I think that they have worked extremely hard. A personal story, when we all went into lockdown last March here in the Bay Area, one of the last things I did before I left the office is have all of the submissions that I was responsible for reviewing printed and put in a binder. And I was so pleased that I did that, because it would have been a lot of printing to do here at home. And my first couple of weeks here in lockdown, I spent reading the memos. So I have a very specific association with reading the submissions and the early stage of lockdown here in San Francisco. And so I think it's a lot of work, so well done. I really am looking for original thought. You know, I think that one of the things that makes my team here at Fenwick, and this is what I try to teach them and young lawyers in general, is applying what you know to the set of facts that you see before you, and obviously looking to find the patterns and the arguments that are going to be most favorable to the company that you're representing, but also think a little laterally, or the cliche term is out of the box, but I like to think about it as original thought. You know, what can you do creatively to convince me as a judge and my fellow judges that will be a little bit more than stating the obvious? And I say that partly because I think it's a good way to advocate for your client, but also because that's what happens in the real world. You know, sometimes the initial set of facts is obvious to most people, frankly, even non-lawyers. And then you layer on an application of the law on top of that. And most decent lawyers can do that. But to really win for your client, you got to think, where can I take it to the next level? So to the extent that you can do that, I find that impressive. There's a tension there too, because you don't want to have original but irrelevant thoughts that are not focused on task, and that's the balance. And then the other thing that is important, and this is something that's very relevant in practice too, is present yourself professionally. I think one of the interesting things about our industry is that we are global, and there is a level of excellence to be expected from all of our colleagues, and our clients expect that, regardless of where we're from and regardless of how we present ourselves. And for example, here in the United States, and certainly at Fenwick, we're a law firm. We don't have a dress code. Everybody wears jeans. It's quite casual from a visual presentation perspective, although our litigators, when they go to court, do wear suits. I'm not a litigator, so I don't need to do that. But nonetheless, one still expects a level of excellence and professionalism, regardless of what industry one is in. And you can do that and strike a balance. So I'm not obviously talking about what people are wearing. That is not what I'm saying. I'm talking more about how one presents oneself. And I think to do that with a level of professionalism and kind of treating the situation as serious as it is for your client is very important, because your client, whether your client is real or fictitious, at that moment dealing with their lawyer, that is the most important thing for your client at that moment in time. And so as counsel, you want to make sure that your client and the people in front of whom you are advocating for your client also feel like at that moment it's the most important thing for you. So hopefully that gives you guys some guidance on what I would be hoping to see as I listen to the submissions.
I think it makes total sense. I don't know how easy this is to process for people who haven't had the good and bad experiences. So, went to court hearings with the crap lawyer and then went with an excellent lawyer and then realized, okay, I didn't feel certain about that guy or that girl because they were totally lost, or they were too chaotic, or they were too, amateurish or friendly or whatever. Like, you go to a doctor and you don't want the doctor to just backslap you and say, hey, I don't know, I mean, maybe 20% exactly. You'll recover. You want the doctor to actually, articulate the thoughts and give you a certain choice. What would you think, in your experience, makes a good in-house lawyer at a game studio? Because I would imagine due to the transactional nature of the practice, you're meeting different lawyers on your side that you represent, on the other side that you go against. And we all know that sometimes it's pretty painful that you run into some guy at a company that your client wants to do a deal with, and you're thinking, how the hell did that person end up in this position? And you look back and you're like, oh, they got hired when the company was still small, and they kind of stick around because it's not very obvious when an in-house counsel makes mistakes. It takes years for them to catch up, and then maybe no one can really put the finger on and say. So I would say, it's pretty easy to say what we find the most annoying in such people. And then you talk to others in the community and they say, oh yeah, oh man, no, don't mention this. And you're like, okay, so everyone thinks that person is not a great in-house counsel. Okay, so it's not my issue, right? But what makes a good in-house counsel? What are some of the qualities that you think the younger lawyers could cultivate in themselves to be better in-house counsels? And what made you comment and say, I love working with that person, regardless of the side that they were on?
Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll repeat something I said a moment ago, which is legal excellence. So the tools of our trade as lawyers is to deliver advice that is accurate, or as accurate as we can make it. Sometimes there isn't a clear answer to a question, or sometimes there are several answers to a question. So that's what I mean there. So regardless of your interest in the industry and your excitement about the products and services of your client, if you're in-house, of the company that you work for, you must remember that we're providing advice and we're trying to give a company a steer, both from a legal perspective and sometimes from a business perspective too, on what is the right decision to make based on the information available at a moment in time. So that's a given. And I think for a young lawyer, you should assume that you do not know everything, and that is okay. A very important quality in any lawyer, in-house or at a law firm, frankly, is to know and be humble enough to raise your hand and say, I don't know the answer to that. I still say that, and I've been practicing law for a long time. And when my in-house clients come to me, usually they come to me because they're asking for advice on something that is either peculiar to my area of expertise or the firm's area of expertise, or they want to discuss something that maybe they need additional insight or brainstorming on. And so to say, and to be able to say, I don't know, is important. And just remember that through your career. It's okay. It's actually quite powerful sometimes, because I don't know means I don't know, but I'll find out. And then know that you will follow through on the finding out. Another really important point, and again, I think this is table stakes for an in-house lawyer, you must be seriously familiar with the games that your company makes. And I mean, you need to play them. You need to really understand them. And you need to really also understand kind of the market that you're in, who your audience is, who your players are. And I think these are things that people can learn. If you go from a company that does, R-rated first-person shooter games, there's a certain type of genre and gameplay that happens there. And then if you move jobs and then find yourself in a company where we're really talking about kids games with, interactive but very child-oriented experiences, there are two very, very different series of considerations for a company like A or B, as I just described. And so I always tell my team, and certainly I hear from my in-house clients, that you really need to know your company's products and services. I can tell you it is very obvious if people don't, based on how they describe issues or describe a potential fact pattern. And to my mind, it gives people less credibility if they don't really know what they're talking about. And again, be willing to learn. And then an in-house lawyer has an extremely difficult job, I think, because unless your role at the company is specifically defined and, you know, somewhat narrow, and some larger companies do have roles where one person is a product counselor, one person deals with commercial contracts, one person deals with privacy, let's say. You know, some big companies do have defined product roles, but many don't, and particularly more senior lawyers at companies, as you progress through your career, are looked to bring experience and also wear different hats at the company. So I think the in-house lawyer's job is very hard, very challenging. I've never been one, but you know, lots and lots of friends who are in-house lawyers, and it's a very exciting job. But with that in mind, I think you also need to be nimble and to be able to shift from one series of issues to another and be able to guide your client. And so you've got to be adaptable. And then the other point, and this is again something that I think is really key for an in-house lawyer, is to know that your client needs to get to an answer. And so giving a legal theoretical answer in most cases isn't really helpful. And from where I sit as outside counsel, I can tell you for sure, also giving a legal theoretical answer in almost all cases is interesting, but not super helpful, because most of the time my client wants to know what I recommend. And my favorite clients, and many of them I'm hoping to see in Vilnius later in the year, are the kind of in-house counsel who will say to me, and people say this to me all the time, Jennifer, you know, I know that there are shades of gray on most of the answers that you give me. So I'm not going to, you know, hold you to it if I make a decision internally based on a series of recommendations you make. But I do want you to make a recommendation. You know, when you're sitting at your company and maybe the CEO or the CFO or the executives are asking you a decision, what should you do in this circumstance? Your job as in-house counsel is to make a recommendation to your board, to your client, to your boss, if you're a more junior lawyer. And so when you call outside counsel, you need to know that you have a trusted partner who will say, yes, it's gray. Yes, there are a few options, but this would be this wouldn't be an imprudent thing to do, for example. So have courage as an in-house lawyer to ask those questions of the people in your ecosystem. And then, you know, as an in-house lawyer, find outside counsel that you trust. I think one of the things you said a minute ago, Sergey, is really important. A personal connection goes a long way for a relationship, because if you know people and you get to know them and you trust them and you trust their expertise, when you're in that moment where there's a really difficult problem ahead of you, having a trusted series of people in your ecosystem will really make all the difference. What
I would say on that point particularly is that once you get to a certain level, let's say you work with top firms, your budget, your game studio's budget allows for picking and choosing, and more or less, I would say at a certain level, at the top level, it's going to be the same. I didn't really see much difference. I didn't see any firms overcharging or like some firms going, with few exceptions, but yes, they are. And in general, what you try to do is to navigate to the lawyer that is similar to you, that shares the same cultural background or same, I don't know, communicational style. And then you're done, you're good. And then you stick with them for some years. And it's not that people are changing lawyers because that lawyer knows law better. It's more of, they both know law great, but that lawyer speaks more like I speak and is able to understand me from whatever, like, you know. So that's what I saw, is that the ultimate goal is not only to get a great lawyer, but to get a great lawyer that not so much you trust, like you trust all of them, but you're on the same page. Like, you can have a conversation and it'll just 10 minutes will cover the whole like 2 or 3 years. The other thing is, once we were looking for some legal matter in Turkey, and I still really loved I hope you'll meet the gentleman Ali. He's coming. Hopefully, he's coming this year. Who knows? He said that his clients very often they don't really want a legal opinion. They want business advice. So his job is to go through all the laws and all the regulations, and then ultimately he may just say, "No, you cannot do that," or "Yes, you can do it. And if you want, here's 30 pages. Do you want to read them? Sure, go ahead." But ultimately, he's the guy who goes on this adventure, does the thinking, and then gives them a practical answer rather than sending them the pages of text and then, "Well, I don't know what this means. This is what it means." And like the final example is that recently I was in a meeting with some people from outside of here who flew in. And it was at the time when the regulations were changing. Do you need to do the test as you arrive? Do you need to do 2 tests? Can you go out? Can you stay in the hotel but move to a different room? So no one knew things. And there was the person in charge of that meeting. And then one guy says basically, "Hey, I don't really have my test results. Where can I get them?" And so I thought the answer to that is getting the test results. But in that meeting, the answer was "Oh, let me call this guy, who'll call this guy, and then they'll call the clinic, and then they will, do something." I was like, well, that wasn't an answer. That was just an explanation. It's the same as me asking a lawyer, "Can I do this?" And the lawyer telling me, "Well, this is the law. This is what it says." It's like, okay, can I do this? As a developer, I want to know the ultimate,
exactly.
The business/legal answer, and not just the legal sort of theoretical. And I think that a lot of younger lawyers, they think that there's a lot of knowledge of law and less of knowledge of business, whereas to be in your position, you need to know how the business operates. You need to know
Absolutely.
The whole production process, the whole thinking process. You need to know how negotiations go, and then you're able to suggest to them something that resolves the whole thing, is legal, and solves the business issue, as opposed to just saying, "I'm an expert in American law." Okay, well, but help me make a decision. I'm not here to get theoretical, knowledge.
Exactly. Those are discussions for, later over a drink or something sometimes. And honestly, I always say to my team here, if you haven't gotten your client's attention in the first sentence of an email with an actual answer, you've lost them. So I think we do that a lot at Fenwick, exactly what you just described, Sergey. We have the memos and all of the legal theories to support what we say, but often we don't share those with clients unless the client wants those. We actually, and some of the clients that we work with who are in Vilnius know this, we actually often present our work product with visuals. So we provide a series of images because that often explains the answer more easily, especially if it's going to non-lawyers too. And you're trying to explain how a user flow works in order to get people to do something within a game or a character like I talked about earlier. And I find that people in the games industry, even on the business and legal side, are usually creative or creative thinkers, which is why I mentioned my point about original thought earlier. And presenting something visually, sometimes a picture says 1,000 words, and you can actually really explain what you mean. And so we do that a lot here, and that resonates well. So I think what you say, find the right groove with your client or with your counsel, and make sure that you really are able to have an authentic conversation about how you like communication style too is important.
I think that's a great finishing point for our conversation, in the sense that all those guys competing in the legal challenge, I'm sure that most of them will end up working in the games industry professionally, especially now that it's much more open to work from home or work from whatever country you're coming from, because it's a global industry. But I think that what you just articulated is their future is not in being an expert in law. I mean, they should know law, sure, and not really in being the expert in technology, but in being this kind of an interlocutor between the two worlds, and being good at this, and connecting people with knowledge and transporting this knowledge to the people. And it's a blue ocean for them. One of them or two, they will become different people. So different clients will look at them and say, "I really like how this girl or this guy works." and I want to stick with them, and I want to, you know, work with them as a team, because I like that they make complicated things easier to get, or they do very thorough research and they have all the background, but it's also 5-minute meeting with the development team, and the development team gets it. And I think this is really where they have the biggest potential, and it will not take years. It'll take, you know, a couple of years. It's not going to take 20 years for them to either get good at this or not really, and then they can always be an IP counselor of a book company or something. Thanks a lot for your time. Thanks a lot for taking the time to grade all those submissions. I know that you guys are putting a lot of effort into being fair. We anonymize the submissions so no one really knows which team is coming from. And now we have a Serbian team, a Polish team, a British team, and an international team. All of them are strong, and none of you guys knew where, you know, the memo is coming from. So that gives already additional importance to them qualifying. You know, out of more than 20 teams that applied, in less than a month, you'll be in the courtroom, and we will know who wins. And then all of them will come to the summit at the next opportunity. They all have the standing invitation in the hotels. So you'll be able to, you know, come to them and say, hey, don't worry, you know, the memo was really great. It doesn't matter if you're like number 2 or number 3, or maybe the opposite. I don't know.
I can't wait to, I'm really looking forward to the judging, and I can't wait to hear all of the arguments.
Let the stronger team win. Thanks a lot. Absolutely. And I'm going to try to... Before I forget, these are all the great firms helping run the challenge and run the summit. I see that we need to update Fenwick West brand to the new brand. So Mindaugas, if you hear me, let's do this. And we will see you in the next presentation video. Thank you for watching.